This is the introduction to the Agile methodology and the implementation of Agile in different industries. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Karina Simoni, and currently I'm studying towards my Master's of Learning, Design, and Technology at the North Carolina State University and have received my Bachelor's of Business Information Technology from Virginia Tech. Finally, I'm the daughter of a farmer. I have a few objectives for you today. First, I want to make sure that you have a basic understanding of the Agile methodology and its basic concepts. Next, we're going to explore some practical applications because the best way to learn something is to do it. We'll look at software development, lesson planning, and farming or crop planning. Let's start with the basic concepts. What is Agile? Well, it's an iterative approach to project management, usually software delivery. Before we get into the thick of it, let me explain what was happening before. Before Agile came into light, before it was created, we were using something called waterfall project management. So think of a waterfall. The river leading up to it is the planning stage. The planning usually takes anywhere from a month to 6 months. And you talk to the customer at the very beginning. As we move down the waterfall, we're developing the product, and we're not talking to the customer at all. The development takes anywhere from 2 months to 2 years. At the end of the waterfall, we finally deliver our product to our customer. Our customer hasn't talked to us since the beginning of the project. The customer sees the project, and he hates it because it's not what he wanted, and we wouldn't know that unless we had talked to him throughout the process. Well, Agile fixes that. Instead of building the software and then delivering it to the customer, we're going to build it incrementally from the start of the project, instead of delivering it all at once. The Agile methodology is backed up by the Agile Manifesto. This was created by the people who created Agile, and it has 12 principles. I'm not going to go over all 12 today, but I will go over the gist. First, we want to focus on individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We're going to bring that customer into the process, and they're going to work with us throughout the entire thing instead of at the beginning and the end. Next, we're going to focus on working software over comprehensive documentation. We want to make sure that the customer has what they want, and at the end, then we'll document. Next, we're going to focus on customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Again, that feedback from our customer is so important. Without it, we're just going to end up delivering something that they don't want or doesn't work at the end again. Finally, Agile focuses on responding to change over following a plan. When we live in this world today, everything changes so quickly. Processes change, technology gets updated, people change, styles change, everything changes on a dime. And project management should be able to do that too. So why is Agile effective? We saw that our customer didn't receive the product that they wanted in waterfall. And Agile fixes that through improving the communication, reducing the time to delivery, and reducing the risk of failure because we can show the customer what we're working on. I always say that if you can show the customer what they don't want, they'll finally tell you what they actually need. This is important. And it also improves collaboration, not just between the customer and the person creating the project, but also between all of the people who are working on that team. So if we look at this famous tree example, a customer has asked us to build a swing. In the first picture in the top left, the customer has explained it in a very confusing way, and so we don't actually understand how to build it correctly. You can see through all the different trees that we see everyone on the team sees it in a different way. And at the end of the project, if you look at the bottom row, the project it doesn't get documented. Not all of the operations or the wants are installed. The customer is way overbilled, and there's not a lot of support. In the final picture in the bottom right, the customer needed something that they didn't even know. And they wouldn't know that unless we could show them what we were building. That's why Agile is effective. It shows the customer what is happening, brings them into the process, and gets the team feedback so they can move in a direction that is more productive and efficient. So what are the components of Agile? What are the things that make Agile work? Well, first we're going to gather user stories. These are the requirements or the things that our customer wants or needs. Then we're going to do some sprint planning. Sprints are usually 1 to 4 weeks, and this is the time that we're actually going to develop the product, those iterations we were talking about before. We're also going to have a daily scrum, and this is where we're going to foster the communication through the team, and we'll see how that works a little later. There's also items called the sprint review. This is where we're going to look at what we did in the sprint, should things be reprioritized, and do things need to be removed. There's also the sprint retrospective. This is when the team looks at how they worked in the last sprint to see what they did wrong, what they did right, and how can they improve. There's a couple of roles. First, we'll start with a product owner. This is the person who is talking to the customer, who's gathering those user stories, and who is planning the sprints. They're creating a list of prioritized user stories. There's a Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is really there to talk to the team and facilitate conversation and to help remove any roadblocks. The Scrum Master is a servant leader, whereas a project manager would be telling the team what to do and not helping them get to where they need to go. So the Scrum Master is a special role. And finally, there's a development team. These are the people who are actually doing the work in each of the sprints. So if we look at the picture on the right, we have a product backlog. These are our user stories that have been prioritized by our product owner. Next, we have our sprint backlog. This is the user stories that we have selected to do in our first sprint. And then you see the sprint. The sprint is lasting 30 days, and each of those days we're meeting in a daily scrum. And scrum, by the way, is a term that comes from rugby, when the team would get together and huddle, talk about how they can improve the next go-around. At the end of our sprint, we're going to have a working increment of the software, which we're going to demo to our customer, receive feedback, and that's going to start the sprint review, where based on the customer's feedback, we will reprioritize our user stories. And finally, we'll have a sprint retrospective to talk as a team and say, what did we do wrong, what did we do right, and how can we improve? You can see how we talked about earlier that Agile really improves the communication among team members and the collaboration. And we're always talking and we're always trying to see how can we get better. So let's look at this in a practical application because, like I said earlier, that's really the best way to learn. We're going to start with software development. This is the usual way that Agile is used, but the Agile Manifesto will tell you as long as you're following those principles, you're doing Agile. So let's start with planning. We're going to plan our sprint based on the user stories that we receive and the time that our sprint is. We're going to plan those user stories into a sprint backlog, and it's going to look something like this. Now, some people use software on the internet to keep track of their user stories. Some people just use sticky notes on a whiteboard. So you'll have a to-do column. These are going to be your sprints. So if we look at these rows as sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, then we're going to say we need to do we need to do 5 things for sprint 1, and as we work on them throughout the sprint, we'll move them to the in progress so that everyone knows what is being worked on. And finally, when something is completed, we'll move it to the done column. So that way everyone knows what has been worked on, what is completed, and even what hasn't been worked on yet. Everyone on the team should be able to view this so that they can have that insight into what's happening in the project. No one on the team should be left out of any conversation, and if they have to be away, then that person needs to be caught up later, and that's another task for the Scrum Master. So we need to choose how long our sprints are going to be. Again, these are either 1 to 4 weeks, and as we go through these sprints, again, we're going to have a daily Scrum. This should be no longer than 15 minutes, and it's the whole team in there without the customer. And we're talking about what did we do yesterday, what do we do today, and does anyone need any help? Finally, during the sprint, this is when the actual work gets done. In Agile, we also want to have some time for reflection. At the end of the sprint, we're going to demo the item that we've built to the customer, get feedback, and talk about it in the sprint review. Do we need to reprioritize anything? Do we need to remove anything? And do we need to change the way that we're doing things? This is called backlog grooming. The product owner will do that and change the priority or refine anything, make things more specific if needed. And then at the very end, we'll have a sprint retrospective where the team will get together and talk about what did they do poorly, what could they improve, and do they need to change the way that they're doing things. So this is Agile in software development. So if we go through a quick example of building a website, we're going to ask the customer, what kind of website would you like? They'll give us user stories. The product owner will plan it during sprint planning and put it into a sprint backlog. During our sprints, which are 1 to 4 weeks, we'll have daily scrums to talk about who built item 1 for the website yesterday, what are we going to build for the website today, and does anybody need any help? Then we're going to actually build the website. At the end, we're going to reflect. What went well? What didn't go well? Maybe our website, we put a blue background and the customer thought it was ugly. Or we put a red background and they thought it was great, but they wanted a different color font. So during backlog grooming, the product owner will reprioritize or change things. Instead of our font being requested as white font, they'd like a different color, say purple font. And then we'll keep going through these sprints and these iterations until we've created something that the customer is happy with. That's Agile in software development. The next way that we can use Agile is in lesson planning. Now, I'm not a teacher, but I do provide a lot of education and awareness to people in my company. And so instead of teaching the K through 12 space, I teach corporate America and adults. However, I do believe that this could be used very effectively in the K through 12 space, and especially at the college level. So let's give some background to this example. We're math teachers. And we have a vision. We want to teach basic math. Our time frame is 9 weeks. So we're going to make our sprint cycles 2 weeks each. We want to teach addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Our last week is going to be review and testing, which will be a mini sprint, since our time frame is only 9 weeks. As we execute our sprints, we're going to have daily scrums. So this in a classroom would be with students coming in and you taking that first 10 to 15 minutes to talk to them. What did we learn yesterday? Get them involved, get them talking. This might be hard to do with a larger class size, but encouraging people to raise their hand and speak is really important. What are we going to learn today? And does anyone need any help? Now, this is where the teacher will have to play the role of the Scrum Master and use their observations from the previous day to kind of foster this communication. Maybe they saw that people were having trouble adding double-digit numbers. Should we review it? And maybe kind of facilitating those questions, seeing and feeling out what kind of assistance the class needs will actually bring it out of them, and they'll tell you, yeah, we had problems with double-digit numbers. So using that feedback from your team or your classroom, you're gonna implement that in your sprint, where you're actually gonna be doing the work or practicing the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. At the end of the week or the 2-week cycle, you're gonna have a sprint review. How did things go and how did we struggle? What can we improve for next week? I want to ask my students, what wasn't working? Was I explaining it in a way that you were not understanding? How can I do it better? Do you need more pictures? Do you need to use more physical items like adding beans or marbles, different things like that? How can we improve? And where did we struggle? Do we need to reprioritize and focus on that topic more? These feedback that we get is going to be incorporated into our backlog grooming. This is the reprioritization I was talking about earlier. Maybe somebody's stuck somewhere and we need to make sure that they meet that learning objective. So that's Agile in lesson planning. It's not going to have the specific roles of product owner, Scrum Master, development team, but the principles stay the same. We're going to foster that communication. We're going to focus on collaboration, and we're going to bring in our customer or our students into the conversation. We want to know how they're feeling about the topics. What can we do better? How can we serve them better? Agile is all about serving our customer and making sure that they're getting what they need and what they want. That's Agile and lesson planning. Now let's look at farming or crop planning. So I grew up on a farm with a mother who is our farmer, and she did extensive planning. She has very detailed notes, and she keeps a lot of different items around the house to help her with her planning. And when I learned Agile, I said, this could really help her. So our background is that we're vegetable farmers. We have a vision. We want to plant and harvest for only the summer season. And our time frame is going to be 12 weeks. So we're going to make our sprint cycles 1 week each. We want to first harvest the spinach, then plant the tomatoes, harvest the kale, then plant the beans, harvest the chard, then plant the zucchini, and then in our next sprint we'll just plant watermelon. So these are some examples. We're not going to go through all 12 of our sprints. When we're executing our sprints, we're going to have a daily scrum. We're going to spend 15 minutes just sitting down and talking to ourselves. What did we do yesterday? Did I get all of the spinach harvested? What do I need to get done today? Do I need to spend time finishing harvesting the spinach? Or can I go ahead and plant the tomatoes? Did I get all of the tomatoes planted? Different things like that. Do I need any help? Should I ask my kids or should I hire someone? Am I not getting everything done that I need to get done? And then we're going to do the work. We're going to either plant or harvest the plants per our schedule. Our schedule are our user stories. At the end of each week, we're going to have some reflection. We're going to review. Are the tomatoes thriving? Do I need to add more fertilizer? Which plants did not sprout? Maybe I need to start some more. And what do I need to improve for next week? So you can see that we're not really talking to a team because farmers are usually working by themselves. In large-scale farming, they'll be talking to their farmhands. And we do have customers, but our true customer for farmers is really ourselves, because we've done a lot of research and we know what grows well in our region. So we're going to plant things that we know are going to grow well. So that's why we'll plant tomatoes, then we'll plant beans, then we'll plant zucchini. Farmers really know their weather. But speaking of the weather, maybe there's a big storm coming and they need to plan for that for next week. These are the different questions farmers should be asking themselves. Based on that, they're going to do some backlog grooming. They're going to look at their plans to harvest the kale. Maybe the kale isn't ready yet. Maybe it needs one more week. Or maybe it's going to be really hot and all of the kale and chard need to come out before we can even plant the beans or zucchini, because heat affects the flavor of the plants. So that's Agile in farming or crop planning. Again, Agile is just fostering the feedback loop, bringing in time to talk about what is going well and what's not going well, and how can we improve. It can be applied in so many ways, whether you're a small farmer or you're a large-scale farmer with a lot of farmhands. So let's review. Agile is an iterative approach to software delivery, but we also saw through lesson planning and farming how it can be applied in different industries. Agile focuses on individuals and interactions and being okay with changing requirements. We want to know what our customers don't want as much as what they do want. This helps us deliver a better product in a more efficient time. Agile is composed of sprint planning, daily scrums, sprint reviews, and sprint retrospectives. These are all carried out by the product owner, a scrum master, and the development team. Again, as long as we're using the principles that Agile is based on, you're going to be doing Agile. And you don't need all of the components to be perfect unless you're in software development. Software development really works best using Agile if you're following it to a T. However, it can be adapted, and that's the best part about it. So going through this picture again, we have a product backlog. These are our user stories that our product owner has gathered. These are the policies that we're following that students need to learn addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. These are the plants that we know grow well in our region and will sell well at market. And we're going to put these into a sprint backlog. These are sprints that are 1 to 4 weeks. And we're going to say that we're going to build these 3 features. We're going to teach these 3 aspects about addition. We're going to plant 2 kinds of crops and harvest 3 kinds of crops. In our sprints, we're going to do the actual work. We're going to build the features. We're going to teach the lessons. And we're going to pull in the crops or plant them. Each day, we're going to spend a few minutes, 10 to 15, talking about what we did yesterday, what are we going to do today, and how can we improve? Does anyone need help? At the very end of our sprint, we're going to have a working increment of our software. We're going to have covered a lesson. We're going to have brought in crops and they're ready for market. We're going to take some time to reflect in a sprint review to see what feedback from our customer, from our students, from the weather, or the way the plants are growing, and we're going to reprioritize our user stories. We'll also have a sprint retrospective where we talk to our team, talk to our students, talk to our plants if we have to, and see what's going well, what didn't go well, and how can we improve. All throughout this, the Scrum Master, the teacher, the farmer is going to say, how can I be a better servant leader to these to this development team, to these students, to the plants. It's really important to have that feedback loop because that's what Agile is all about. Those individuals and the interactions between them to foster the communication and collaboration that makes Agile successful. We saw this in software development, lesson planning, and farming and crop planning. This can apply to most industries all over the world. Remember, Agile is all about adapting to change, and Agile can be adapted too. So let's wrap up. We went over an introduction to Agile, the methodology and its basic concepts. We saw some practical applications in farming, lesson planning, and software development. And now it's your turn. Take this to your family. Talk about what you're going to do for the week in terms of homework, in terms of chores, and at the end of the week, spend time talking to your family. Talk about what went well, what didn't go well. Maybe you need to change the carpool or the bedtimes, the different time spending on homework or TV. Or you can apply it to your job. If you're a teacher, try to do this in your lesson planning. And if your lessons have already been planned, just try to pull in the feedback loop. Try to talk to your students more, see how they're doing. See how you can improve as a teacher. See what they need and what they want. If you work in corporate America like me, you might find a little more of a roadblock moving to Agile unless you're in a company that is really for it, but don't be afraid to push it because this is what keeps corporate America companies having an edge. This is what most startups are using to develop software and what much larger companies need to be moving towards. Agile is not perfect for all situations. However, the principles of it, some of them can be pulled out to improve the way that things are done, even if you're just going to foster that feedback loop and meet for a few minutes each day. I hope that you have a basic understanding of Agile now and that you can see how it can be applied in different industries. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below.